Great. So thanks again. We've got a good group here. We're going to go through the draft framework document, get your feedback on a couple of things to finalize it, and then I'll talk about next steps at the end. So this is our agenda for today, and I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. We just wanted to kind of go over what we've done and what we've been working on in the last few sessions, particularly with reference to like making the framework. And so as we've talked about in previous meetings, we're creating a Neponset River Watershed Climate Collaborative, and that's the coalition of the municipalities in the watershed. We know that climate solutions aren't located just in one town, they cross municipal borders. And so we think that coming together to find solutions for climate adaptation on a regional scale is a better use of resources and also the knowledge that towns have and can share with other towns. We're convening a space for municipalities and community-based organizations and other environmental justice advocacy groups to coordinate planning and implementation of climate solutions on a watershed scale. And then we're developing a framework. Oh, hold on. We're developing the framework on a regional collaboration, which is the framework that we're going to be talking about today. Consolidating, and what we did for that is as the steps that we've been going over, we consolidated the regional climate impacts that a lot of the municipalities have already created into a plan. We've worked on prioritizing those in a bunch of different ways, both through collecting them from plans and seeing what the commonalities were, and then working on finding out what can work across scale. And in the last meeting, we looked at ranking a lot of those priorities so that we could prioritize them further. And then in this meeting, we'll be going over some of the steps that have been taken since then to kind of rank them, find a ranking system for them that we've worked on. Next slide. And so why do we need a framework? I've gone over that a little bit before, but we're looking to preserve and protect the watershed's natural and recreational resources. There's a lot of people that reside in the watershed, and we would all like them to have access to natural and recreational areas to help mitigate the best as possible the climate impacts and climate hazards that we're going to see with a changing world. To be proactive to climate adaptation rather than reactive, doing these things in advance will help time and money and the impacts that we will see down the road. To be more cooperative across borders, to guide climate resilience planning efforts, which participating municipalities, all of you here, have collectively committed to advancing and implementing, both in the plans that you have done individually and then kind of through this process, seeing what can be worked on together, to provide the collaborative with a roadmap to identify resources and opportunities, which will be a little bit of what we're working on today to make the process a little bit more effective moving forward. And then to prioritize the efforts and actions that will have the biggest impact, possibilities for implementing them cooperatively, and then how we can help each other. Next slide. And this is kind of something we went over last time. This is part of the framework document where we have the vision and objectives. I'm not going to read this to you. We've sent the document out, so hopefully a lot of you have been able to review that. But the main objectives of the collaborative are kind of what is the important part of this, and that's in brief, fostering partnerships, determining collective goals and priorities for the watershed, identifying and pursuing any technical assistance and funding for watershed scale projects, and then supporting the implementation of projects through a regional approach to help climate adaptation in the watershed. Next. And so what we've done to date. We've talked a little bit about it, but we've been facilitating the focus groups on equity, environmental justice. We established a steering committee that met in March, and we're workshopping draft vision statements for the collaborative we're talking more about. We ranked shared climate adaptation priorities that we identified through municipal planning efforts. And then last time we looked at some evaluation criteria for collaborative priority implementation strategies. And that's kind of what we'll be working on today and going over. Fan will be talking a little bit more about that. And then in April, we hosted a climate resilient land use workshop that is recorded and available for those that weren't able to make it. So I'll hand it over to Van for the.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Before we move on, I also just want to point to the questions we have at the bottom here. We were able to start engagement to sort of kick off this collaborative. However, we would love to hear from you what are other engagement activities we should consider to, for outreach for the next phase of the project. So if you have any ideas, anything that have been successful to connect with folks in your community, please drop in the chat and or email us at a later time. We would love to hear any other solutions or any approaches that we should take as well to continue building momentum for the collaborative. Actually, before that, we're going to pause for questions. Do you have any questions so far about the formation of the collaborative, the vision and objectives that we just shared with you? If you do, please also put it in the chat. We can circle back as well. So the main piece at this phase for this collaborative and framework development work is one, as Jeff mentioned, reviewing all of the priority actions that you have identified in your MVP planning work. We're recognizing that this is we shouldn't be starting from scratch here. There are a lot of great work that have already been happening in your community. And so how can we leverage all of that, thinking about the needs and resources that to support your community work, but also what can we scale up at regional watershed scale level so that we can all streamline the resource or kind of share practice and resource to address or advance climate resilience. So we compiled the list, and I'll show you in a little bit kind of what we have. I think also in the draft planning document that Carrie sent out, you can kind of see the compiled list of priority strategies kind of like from the regional perspective there as well. And so what we have also done is kind of moving this smaller, more consolidated list of priority actions into evaluations and prioritization, kind of thinking about what would be most impactful. This is very high level qualitative assessment at this point to get a sense of, what would be most impactful and effective for the collaborative to kind of focus on in the upcoming years. And so based on the first meetings feedback that we've heard, there are 4 key a set of evaluation criteria that we focus on for the assessment at this point. Centering equity, thinking about whether the strategy has any contribution to improving social equity in the region, in the watershed. And then co-benefits potential, if implemented, what are some of the co-benefits, such as increasing public access, public health improvement, safety, biodiversity is key and have been heard throughout as one of the co-benefits potential. So how much of that, this strategy that we select will be implemented? What would that look like? Level of effort to implement. Very realistically and practically, you all are beyond your max capacity, I am sure. And so we want to be cognizant too of like, is this going to be a lot of effort or low effort, and factor that into the kind of prioritization exercise as well. And of course, cost, where are we going to get the money from to do that? How much is it going to cost? And so we took that into account as well. I provide a snapshot of how we kind of break down the scoring. Again, very high level scoring in terms of trying to make sense of, the assessment of these strategies. And you can kind of see at the bottom here, went through a couple of rounds internally among the project team to sort of give that evaluation score so that we could see what are some of the strategies that rose to the top. So again, I won't go through all of this. You have the planning document with you. We will also talk about these more in details in breakout group session, which I want to save the most time for. But just want to share with you here sort of the list you see on the screen. We break them down into smaller, easier to bite focus areas. This one is on flood mitigation. Here are kind of the priority strategies that we were able to consolidate or kind of, put together as something for the collaborative to focus on. And what you see in the blue are the strategies that actually rose to the top with their evaluation scoring. And then to add to it, the strategy that has a star here, there are two of them. Those are the ones that we also received feedback from Framework Meeting 1 that they are considered high priority in our breakouts, in our focus group discussion. And so, as you can see, it's not just the scoring itself, but also from feedback we previously received. That's how we determine at this point. These are the strategies that we will further develop some implementation details to at least kind of figure out like what would happen next if the collaborative decide to move forward with these. So these are the one that you will be working on in terms of helping us filling in some of the implementation details in a few minutes there. So this one is for flood mitigation, specifically focusing on infrastructure improvement. I'm going to give you 2 seconds to look at this. And so here are the priority actions for natural resource, floodplain protection, and restoration, again, still under the flood mitigation focus area. And there are 3, and then 1, protect and promote the preservation of wetlands, including the restoration of fill wetlands and floodplain areas, rose to the top in terms of both receiving feedback and the scoring that we will develop the implementation blueprint for. Here's one for bylaws and regulations. So required the consideration of future precipitation projections. It's the one we're going to develop the blueprint for. And here's for extreme storms. There were 3 that rose to the top, and we're going to develop implementation blueprint for the 2 here. Perform vulnerability study on transportation, bridges, and culvert affected or potential affected by future flooding, including evacuation routes, and analyze future threat to critical infrastructure, facilities, and residences based on projections of sea level rise and intense storms. For extreme heat, 2 also rose to the top in terms of scoring, and based on feedback also, we're going to go to make blueprint for the 3rd one here. Last but not least, drought and wildfire rose to the top scoring, and we're going to develop one for the 4th one here. Any questions so far?
Van, there's one question in the chat from Tom Birmingham. Benchmark question, can you please share whether the evaluation framework is based on any existing state, federal, or international standard setting framework? This could help us rationalize the use of this framework at our respective municipalities.
Yeah, really good question, Tom. So the criteria, the evaluation criteria that I show here, as you can see, there are only 4, very limited. So they align. We have been doing our research and lit review and all of that. So they align in terms of kind of some of the feedback we received from our climate action planning experience with communities within the MAPC region, as well as sort of some of the evaluation criteria that was kind of identified at one state or doing their climate action plans too. So I'm gonna say there's no specific formula of how these came out. But at this point, again, this is very high level to kind of get a sense of like, here are what rose to the top, sort of like what has come out based on like these kind of key criteria that kind of talked about and shared with the group. Again, very qualitative, I recognize that, but I think this gives a sense of like, here's what's happening or what we're seeing. And this is the opportunity for the collaborative to provide feedback. And there's definitely going to be a need for more more detailed technical analysis down the line to like really make sure there's cost benefit analysis that we did not include in here, right? To like really drill down to the level of like, okay, what is the feasibility and the impact, the level of impact to implement these strategies if we move forward. So, yeah.
Thanks, Van. Tom Birmingham here real quick. I think this is fine. Relative to some of the risk management decision-making models I've worked with in the past, you're essentially establishing a relative risk of the different action items that you have identified that need to get worked on. It's just which ones do you prioritize over the other. And qualitative assessment is fine based on professional experience. I think we just may get asked, how does this relate to other decision-making models that might be available elsewhere? And I appreciate your response. So thank you.
Yeah. In summary, I think this is just an initial assessment to give the collaborative something to react to. And then as the collaborative and the members start to build momentum and like really drill down to here are the priority actions that you're going to move forward and work together to pursue grant and things like that. Again, to your point, the work we need to pull in, like, more clear, standardized models, hopefully something that will be coming out from the state through the EPA grants and things like that, that really help you have a better sense of cost benefit analysis, right? And things like that, that move you forward. But thanks, Tom. Okay, any other question? All right. So we want to spend, this is great, the more time we have to break into breakout sessions. We do have quite a few implementation blueprints to go through. So we're now going to go into two groups, two breakout sessions. Jeff will lead the conversation around the flood mitigation priority strategies that we're going to build the blueprints for. I will lead the conversation with the remaining topics that you saw there. There are two asks for each of the breakout groups. One is look at the implementation details for the priority strategies that we have built these table for. And then, so what I provide an example here. So we took our first shot at kind of laying out what would be the implementation next steps for these, priority strategies you identify. What are some of the considerations around centering equity, some of the co-benefits, so we fill that out. So we need your help also thinking about who would be the partners to help implement the priority action or strategy. What are some of the funding sources that we should think about to pursue the implementation of the strategy? And then what would success look like if and when you decide to implement these strategies? So kind of note in red here needs collaborative input. That will be the portion that you will provide, that you'll help us provide some of the feedback and ideas for. And then after 20 minutes, Jeff and I will switch room. And then, so you'll get to hopefully discuss all of the different blueprint as much as possible as well. So that's the main portion of the breakout session. And then we just have one additional discussions questions if you have, worked on any of these strategies, because clearly we drew this from your community's plans. What are some of the lessons learned or any best practices, or any challenges or barriers or constraint that, we should keep in mind and noted as well, just to kind of, make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel. So any questions about the breakout session? All right. So with that, I think we could go into the breakout room.
Yeah, I'm gonna send everybody out. See you in a few. Why are they not sending you in? Let's see. Great. So I'd like to invite participants to add any questions or suggestions in the chat. We'll save those. But I also think we might send out a post-meeting survey to sort of collect some of these additional ideas, especially since I think the discussion could have gone on for a lot longer. All right. So next slide, and I think I'm turning it over to Jeff.
So as part of the climate collaborative, there's a statement of commitment we're looking to just for towns to sign on, that this is something they're interested in, this is something they want to be involved in and want to collaborate moving into the future, and just kind of say that, like, there's, as a participating member of this collaborative, they'll foster, as you can see the list here, but foster partnerships and collaboratives to advance climate resilience planning and implementation in the watershed, determine collective goals, we'll identify and pursue technical assistance. I mean, this is kind of similar to a lot of stuff went over, and funding opportunities, support watershed scale climate resilience projects, support implementation of projects throughout the region, and help climate adaptation of the watershed collectively, establish mechanisms for sustaining regional and cross-governmental coordination efforts to protect critical infrastructure and other important resources and systems across the municipalities and the collaborative, and commit appropriate staff resources and expertise to participation in this collaborative going forward and toward the development of regionally coordinated climate preparedness action. And so this is something that we wanted to do to kind of formalize involvement and kind of formalize a commitment from the towns involved. And I think we have a draft sheet that once the whole framework is put together, we can send this to you, and it's something that we would like the municipalities to sign and commit to, and to be able to continue being involved in the climate collaborative going forward. Carrie or Van, do you have anything else to put in there?
No, but it leads nicely into what our next steps are. So first, does anybody have any questions?
Holly was one asked who we would like to sign this from the town.
Is that a town manager, a BOS? The town manager is probably the person who's in charge of staff resources most
Yeah.
directly. But I think that it would be helpful maybe if you want it signed by sort of the person who's in charge of allocating those resources and in charge of sort of the town efforts, to maybe include a little sheet of like, what is this
Yes,
sheet
yeah,
with this?
that's an excellent idea. So based on what we've done today, and any post-meeting survey we send out, we will prepare a final document with everything that we've discussed these last 9 months, and we'll circulate that to everybody for additional feedback before we put the final stamp on it. We will prepare the sign-on. And I think a lot of you know that we have put in an application for a new MVP grant moving forward, and it's a 2-year grant that we proposed. And in there, we are hoping, if we get the funding, we're hoping that we can spend the first year doing some in-reach meetings and meeting with all of your boards of selectmen, and talking to them about this collaborative effort, as well as the flood model, and sort of getting their buy-in and asking them to appoint 1 or 2 either staff or volunteers to serve on a steering committee for the collaborative. And that effort would be based on the framework. What is the governing body of a collaborative? What does it look like? How do we facilitate it? On a regional basis. And so that's really what we'd like to focus on in the first year, and then maybe hold our first steering committee meeting in the spring of next year. And then the second year would actually be pulling all of that governance and structure, who, identifying who eligible members are, et cetera, in that second year. And most of you have signed on, which is fantastic. We're really looking forward to working with you. So I guess I'd stop there and say, does anybody have any questions? I know that's a really high level overview of what we're hoping to do, but once we confirm that we've gotten the grant, we'll be in touch with more details.